In the last trial, I faced a beast born of shadow and rage. Victory was not about strength, but about understanding its fear. Now, that memory feels like a distant echo. The world has shifted again, pulling me toward a new edge, a new mystery. Before me lies the eastern sea, an endless expanse of churning blue-gray water that seems to swallow the sky itself. The air is thick with salt and the deafening roar of waves crashing against black, jagged cliffs. It feels like standing at the very end of the world, where all journeys must either cease or be reborn. The sheer scale of it is humbling, a raw display of nature's power that makes my own quest feel impossibly small. A chilling wind howls around me, carrying with it a sense of ancient sorrow and an untold story. I have crossed deserts of fire and mountains of ice, but this ocean feels different. It is not just a barrier. It is a test of will, a question posed by the horizon itself. As I walked the shoreline, mesmerized by the hypnotic dance of the tide, I noticed something strange. A small bird, no larger than my hand, with vibrant, jewel-toned feathers, was flying with frantic purpose. It would fly inland, pick up a tiny twig or a small pebble in its beak, then fly back out over the vast sea and drop its minuscule cargo into the waves. Over and over, it repeated this seemingly pointless ritual. The pattern was so relentless, so unwavering, it was hard to look away. I watched for what felt like hours as the sun climbed higher in the sky. The bird never rested, its tiny wings beating against the powerful sea winds. There was a profound sadness in its flight, a quiet desperation that resonated with the mournful cry of the waves. This was Jingwei, a name whispered in ancient Talisa spirit of a princess who drowned in these very waters. Now, a bird forever trying to fill the ocean that claimed her. Her task was a monument to persistence, but also a stark portrait of futility. I found a perch on a high cliff, overlooking her tireless work. The sight was both beautiful and heartbreaking. Each twig, each pebble, was a tiny act of defiance against an unbeatable foe. They vanished into the churning depths without a trace, swallowed by the infinite sea. Why? I found myself whispering to the wind. Why continue a task that can never be completed? The sea is endless. Your efforts are a drop against a tide that will never recede. Jingwei didn't stop. Of course, she couldn't hear me. Or perhaps she chose not to. Her singular focus was a world away from my questions. Was this true courage? Or a form of madness to dedicate an eternity to a hopeless cause? I looked out at the surreal landscape, at the way the mists blurred the line between water and sky, making it seem as if islands were floating in the air. In this place, the rules of logic felt thin, and the boundary between determination and delusion was as hazy as the horizon. My contemplation was shattered as the sky began to darken with an unnatural speed. The wind, which had been a steady howl, intensified into a shrieking gale. The calm sea transformed into a monstrous, churning vortex of black water and white foam. A storm, sudden and violent, was brewing directly over the area where Jingwei was working. It was as if the sea itself was lashing out, angry at her audacity. The waves rose like liquid mountains, threatening to wash away not just her recent efforts, but the very shoreline she gathered her twigs from. Her tiny form was tossed about in the tempest, yet she did not flee. She fought against the wind, still trying to drop her pebbles, her defiance unbroken. I was faced with a choice. I could watch, a passive observer to this cosmic drama of persistence versus power, or I could intervene. But to what end? Helping her felt like participating in her beautiful, impossible folly. Yet, leaving her to face the storm alone felt like a betrayal of the very spirit that had carried me this far. The image of her tiny form battling the colossal waves burned into my mind. Is persistence noble? Or is it doomed? The question was no longer philosophical. It was real, and it was happening right in front of me. I couldn't stand by. Her fight, futile or not, was a reflection of my own. I descended from the cliff, my feet finding purchase on the slick, storm-lashed rocks. I focused my energy, not to fight the storm, but to understand its rhythm, its flow. The beast of the last trial taught me that direct opposition is not always the answer. Instead of a shield against the waves, I sought to create a current, a subtle channel to divert the storm's most destructive force away from Jingwei's path. It was a delicate dance, using the ocean's own power to create a pocket of relative calm. The wind still raged, and the rain fell in blinding sheets, but a small corridor of stability formed in the air. Jingwei, sensing the shift, seized the opportunity. She flew with renewed vigor, her tiny payloads now falling into slightly less chaotic waters. I wasn't stopping the storm, but I was giving her a chance. It wasn't about winning the unwinnable war. It was about winning the immediate battle. My intervention wasn't to complete her task for her, but to honor her will to continue it. And then, something incredible happened. As I held the currents steady, and as she continued her relentless work, the storm's fury began to subside. It was as if our combined efforts, my wisdom and her persistence, had proven something to the world itself. The sea didn't calm because it was filled, but because it recognized a balance had been struck. Persistence alone was a tragic, endless cycle, but persistence combined with strategy, with an ally, could reshape the very fabric of fate. The storm didn't just disappear. It receded, pulling back its watery claws, leaving behind a sky washed clean and a sea that glittered under the returning sun. Jingwei circled above me once, a silent acknowledgement passing between us. She then returned to her task, but her flight seemed different, nound, frantic, but measured. Not desperate, but purposeful. I had not solved her eternal problem, but I had learned from it. Endurance is not just about weathering the storm. It's about finding the wisdom to navigate it. As I stood there, catching my breath, a new sound reached me from across the water. A deep, guttural roar that vibrated through the very rock beneath my feet. It was distant, but it promised a challenge of a completely different scale. I left the shore of the Eastern Sea with the image of Jingwei forever etched in my mind. Her quest raises a timeless question. When does persistence become futility? Is it nobler to fight a battle you know you cannot win? Or wiser to accept the insurmountable? Today, I learned that perhaps the question itself is flawed. The value wasn't in the outcome, in the filling of the sea. It was in the act itself, the unwavering commitment, the refusal to surrender to despair. But I also learned that blind persistence can be a prison. It was only when wisdom was added to her will that the world around her changed, even if just for a moment. True strength lies in the balance between an unbreakable spirit and the intelligence to apply it. The journey is not just about enduring the impossible, but about finding clever ways to push back against it. Now, I sail toward that new roar, my resolve hardened, my mind clearer. The horizon glows with a fiery promise, a new dawn, or perhaps a great conflagration. Beyond the sea lies a beast of fire, and another lesson waiting to be learned. Thank you for joining me on this chapter of my journey. If you want to see what lies beyond the horizon, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. The path ahead is uncertain, but together we'll face whatever comes next. See you in the next episode!